John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The word of the Lord. One of the shows that I watched this year is called The Bear on Hulu. The language on the show is the worst language I've ever heard in real life or on a show. The show is about a restaurant in Chicago, and it's more character-driven than plot-driven. There's a character on the show, his name is Richie, and he's the cousin to the main character, who is a decorated chef with Michelin stars and everything. But as you watch the show, sometimes you wonder, I wondered, everything would be better without Richie. Richie has the worst language of everybody by a lot. He's in his 40s, but his dress is juvenile. He fights everybody on everything. He is difficult. He is proud. His attitude is, the worst thing about him is that he has no skills. So, we tend to have a high tolerance level for horrible people with incredible gifting or skills, but Richie is a horrible person with no skills, no gifting. And so the whole time you're like, Richie, just move out of the way and let them do their thing. But then something happens. Carmen, the main character in the show, the decorated chef, loves his cousin, Richie. And so he sends him to learn and to train at this restaurant where they do everything with great excellence. They have thousands of people on their wait list. They pay attention to every detail, every second, every guest. Everybody on staff wears suits. And so Richie goes there, and at first he's himself. He is skeptical, he's dismissive, he's like, you've all drunk the Kool-Aid, all right. And yet at the same time, he can't help but be impressed by the excellence around him. He's drawn to this excellence so that little by little, he goes through this transformation where he wants to become excellent, improve himself, prove himself, and he does. And so as he goes back to his people, he starts apologizing for his past behavior, and he starts wearing suits. And everybody's shocked by this, but he says to them, I wear suits now. He keeps saying that, I wear suits now. Today we're starting our Advent series entitled The Arrival, looking at Jesus, seeing God. We're going to spend the next few weeks in the Gospel of John exploring the coming of Christ to earth, the benefits to humanity from his coming. You see, Richie lived in a dark place. He was locked in this dark prison of his own misery. He was a miserable person, and he made everybody else miserable. But then when he is exposed to the excellence in this restaurant and in its people, it unlocked for him a new way of being. His self-respect grew, his respect for others grew, his skill grew. And in the same way, we as people live in a dark place. We even say that very thing, I'm in a dark place. And what we need is exposure to the light and movement toward the light to begin unlocking for us a new way of being. And that's the significance of Advent for Christians. Advent prepares us for Christmas, and Christmas is all about the arrival of light, the arrival of life, true life, eternal life. And when we're exposed to the life of Jesus, to the words of Jesus, for those who receive him with faith, life is never the same. The arrival of Jesus is the arrival of life. And we all want life, meaningful, healthy, enduring life full of love. And we go after this life in all kinds of things. You go after this life in all kinds of things. But nothing can offer us the life that Jesus does. Here's why. Jesus offers the life of God. Jesus offers the life of God. Look at verse 1 with me one more time. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, each of the four Gospels tells the story of Jesus. And as with every good story, each Gospel goes back in time to tell the story of Jesus, but they each reach back to a different point in time. Mark goes back to one of the prophets, Isaiah, and his prophecies about the arrival of God. Matthew goes back to Abraham, the beginning of Israel. Luke goes back to Adam, the beginning of the human race. But John reaches far back from that to the beginning of time. In fact, he goes before the beginning of time. He says, in the beginning was the Word, meaning that when the beginning of all things took place, the Word was already there. It's an incredible thing. Now, of course, this statement in the first verse of John reminds us of the very first verse of the Bible in Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We are meant to connect the dots. Genesis tells us about the beginning and God. John tells us about the beginning and God, but all is not the same. Because Genesis tells us about the creative activity of God, whereas John tells us about this other entity that was there before the beginning, called the Word. In the beginning was the Word. So this is not a once upon a time story. This is a once before time story. The life before time came to earth to give you life eternal. So at a minimum, this story is like no other. No other story has its origin before time began. Christmas has its origin before time began. But not only was the Word there before time, the Word was with God. The Word was with God. I mean, there's a relationship between the Word and God. Things get complicated in this gospel pretty quickly because the Word that was there before time was there with God. Now, if you close your eyes, and I invite you to do that now for a second, if you close your eyes and you try to think about a time when there was nothing, no humans, no animals, no plants, no oceans, no land, no earth, no heavens, no solar system, no Milky Way, no universe at all. Can you picture it? What then was there? Now you can open your eyes. The answer is God. But what John 1:1 tells us is that there was someone else with God. And that someone else is the Word who was with God. Now, things get even more trippy really fast because then we read that the Word was God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we're being told two different things. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word and God were the same. The Word and God were not the same. Now, you could say Spider-Man was with Iron Man and picture them drinking boba tea in Manhattan, okay? But you would not say Spider-Man was Iron Man. That doesn't make any sense. Now, you could say Spider-Man was with Peter Parker, and that makes some sense. But you would not say Spider-Man was with Peter Parker. That doesn't make sense, leaving alone the multiverse for a moment. And so you see, John seems to be telling us two seemingly incompatible things. The Word was with God, so the Word and God are not the same, and the Word was God. The Word and God are the same. What shall we make of this dilemma? There are a few things we can say. First, from the very first verse, John is letting us know the kind of document that we are reading when we come to the Gospel of John. He wastes no time letting us know that this gospel is in some ways complicated. Some have said that the Gospel of John is shallow enough and deep enough for children and elephants alike to swim in. That's true. You can't approach the Gospel of John like you approach TikTok, mindlessly. You need to be serious to do some serious, or be ready to do some serious thinking, which is what we're going to be doing the next number of weeks. Because that's the kind of document that we have before us. But second, John also gives us the view from above. Some have called the Gospel of John the eagle among the Gospels. See, the other three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, they take a view from below. They're interested in connecting Jesus to the story of Israel. John, on the one hand, does connect Jesus to the story of Israel for sure. But he's also is interested in connecting him to the realm from above, the realm from heaven. And because we are entering a document that is dealing with the realm from above, a realm where we do not live or see day to day. We read it in that passage, things that are visible and invisible. We should expect that our understanding is going to be stretched right from the very first verse. And then third, from the very first verse, John begins to tease out this concept, this reality that Christians have affirmed from the earliest, and that is that God is one and three persons. One and three persons. Father, Son, and Spirit. Now, the Spirit does not come into this verse, but the Father and the Son do by the names God and the Word. So that we read, and the Word was God. They are one. But also John can say, and the Word was with God. They are different persons. All that to say that from the very first verse of this gospel, we're being invited to peer into the mysteries of life before time. And what we find there is the Word, who was with God, the Word, who is God. All that in just one verse. John packs a punch. He just does. Verse 2, he was with God in the beginning. He was with God in the beginning. Okay, not much needs to be said about this verse, which repeats what we've learned in the first verse. That is that there's another agent there with God even for all time. But there's also something not repeated in this verse. Did you catch it? And what's not repeated in this verse is the last clause of the first, and the word was God. And there's a reason for this. You see, the story that John is telling in this gospel is the story of the Word coming to earth while God the Father remains very much in heaven. Do you see? The story of the gospel, the story of Christmas, is the story of the Word coming to earth sent by the Father God. So this gospel is very much about the divinity of Jesus, of the Word. Jesus is God, but it's also about the distinction between Jesus and God, and about Jesus being sent to earth on a mission from the Father. And verse 2 begins to prepare the way for this momentous development when it says, he He was with God in the beginning. The Word becomes a he, a person, a human. This is incredible. The life before time came to earth to give you life. This is why nothing else can give us the life that Jesus does. Not your education, not your parents, not your lover, not your money, not your beauty, not your hard work, not your family, nothing. Jesus offers the life of God. It is literally a life out of this world. Here's why also nothing else can give you the life that he does. Jesus offers the life that conquers darkness. Jesus offers the life that alone conquers darkness. Look at verse 3, we go on. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. So now, John has moved from life before time to life in time, to the creation of all things. Now that he's told us who was there before time, he now tells us what he did. And so he says, through him, all things were made. Nothing, visible or invisible, nothing was made apart from him. Do you realize the kind of claim this is? Here's how other scriptures put the same idea. Colossians 1, we already read it earlier today. For in him, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Hebrews 1. But in these last days, God has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. Listen, the unified teaching of the New Testament is that God created the universe through Jesus Christ. Now, why is this significant? Well, consider the stature of Jesus. We're not just talking about a rabbi, a great teacher, a visionary, charismatic leader here. No, we're talking about the owner of all things, because he is the maker of all things. But he's not just the maker of all things, he's the sustainer of all things. Colossians says that he holds all things together. It's not just like he made things and then disappeared, ceased his involvement. No, he holds it all, moment by moment, all in place. Think about your phone for a minute. Let's say that Apple made your phone. But not only did Apple not make all the different parts that go into that phone, Apple does not keep all those component parts in place every moment at all. Do you see? Jesus not only made everything, all things, but he holds them together. At will, he could collapse the universe. Do you ponder the power of the one we worship? Jesus gives all things existence and meaning. Now, perhaps you're here and you are just exploring the claims of the Christian faith. You have not given your life over to Christ. The Christian faith maybe is something that you've heard of, maybe a lot, maybe little, but you're not convinced of. We're so glad that you're here. We want you here. But I just want you to consider for a few moments the claims that the Bible and Christians make about Jesus. Because no other world leader ever, nor his or her followers, have ever made this kind and these kinds of claims about them. No other text says that all things were created by Buddha or Muhammad or any other great person. But you see, Christians bow to Jesus Christ because all things were made through him and for him. And this statement, that God created all things through him, also sets up the great irony of this gospel. And that is that even though he, Jesus Christ, created all things and all things were created through him and for him, when he came to us, we did not recognize him. We did not receive him. Now, we're going to look at this more next week, but I just want you to imagine that. Imagine that you come home to your own house, to your spouse, to your children, and they don't recognize you. They have no idea who you are. Not only that, they actively reject you. Could you imagine the kind of pain that you would experience? I don't reflect often enough on how difficult it must have been for Jesus to live on earth, constantly having to convince those around him of his goodness, of his rightful place in their lives. I mean, could you imagine having to convince your family consistently of who you are? They're like, wait, what? Say it again. You're our Father? Are you willing to give us a blood sample again? It's like we have amnesia. That's how the world treated Christ. Look at verse 4. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. In him was life. Listen, all life as we know it is derivative. We cannot create life, any life, out of nothing. We simply participate in the reproductive processes that are already perpetuating the life that's already here. But imagine a time when there were no men left on earth. There'd be no NFL. But no men left, no life. There's no more life that can be created. No other humans can be created from there. Same as there's no women, just men. You see, as it is, life is here and we simply keep it going. Now think of endangered species, right? Species that are in danger of becoming extinct. There are certain pandas and gorillas and elephants that might become extinct. And if it gets to the point where there are no more males or females of that species, it's game over. That's it. It's done. We'll never see them again. That's not how life works with Jesus Christ. John says, in him was life, meaning he does not need anything or anyone external to himself to give him life. And he gives life to all things, to everything. It's why he was able to speak to dead people or touch dead people while he was on earth and bring them back to life. In him is life. He is life. John says, and that life was the light of all mankind. So life and light are two different ways of referring to the same reality, which makes sense. I mean, think about it. There is no true light in death, and there is no true life in darkness. And so Jesus, the arrival of Jesus is the arrival of life and light to all humankind. And then we have verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The arrival of Jesus is not like when a couple on their honeymoon arrive in Cancun at an all-inclusive resort. And isn't this the time when we start thinking about such things? We're like, oh man, this fog out there, forget it. I gotta get out of here. But it's not like that. His arrival is more like when firefighters arrive at a burning building with children trapped inside. Except that usually people who are trapped inside a burning building do not fight the firefighters. They're happy and grateful that they've arrived. See, that's what's so messed up about our human condition. The firefighter is here, the building is burning, there is no doubt about that. But we say, no, thank you. Now, we'll look more at that next week, but just think about this. Because here's the question. Since we fight the light has arrived and we fight it, how do we then push against the darkness? Because there is no doubt or confusion that the world is dark. However you define that darkness, racially, religiously, ideologically, politically, economically, however you do that, we know, gosh, everybody knows the world is a dark place. So since we we close our eyes to the arrival of the light from God, how do we push against the darkness? Oh, we do it in so many ways. We do it through hero worship. In the Gospel of John, the first chapter, a number of people come to John the Baptist and ask him, are you the Messiah? And he says, I am not the Messiah. Then, so who are you? Are you Elijah? Are you one of the prophets? Do you see what they're doing? There are people that they're willing to listen to and follow. And we have the same. We all are willing to align ourselves. We find somebody, whatever the field, we find somebody that seems to us has the solution and we align right behind them. And there are people who are always willing to elevate themselves for others to follow them. And it gives us this sense that we're pushing against the darkness. Another way we do it is through skepticism. In the Gospel of John, in chapter 1, we come upon Nathanael. And Philip comes to Nathanael and tells him, we have found the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. And what does Nathanael say? Nazareth? Time out. Can anything good come from there? He's skeptical. But see, we embrace skepticism. We live in such a skeptical age where we pride ourselves in being able to decide what goodness is and what goodness is not, and where goodness can come from and where it most definitely cannot come from. And we pride ourselves in our doubt, not realizing that at the very moment we're doubting whatever it is, we're trusting in ourselves. We also do it through education and knowledge. In the Gospel of John, in chapter 3, we come upon Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee, a member of the Jewish ruling council. It says in John, Israel's teacher. Actually, that's what Jesus calls him, Israel's teacher. Much learning. This is a big one for our culture. We, as a culture, highly prize that education and knowledge is how we're going to push against the darkness. I lose track of how many years I spend in a classroom. Of course, there's something great about learning. But that's what words like U of M, MSU, NYU represent to us. It's our solution to humanity's ills. We also push against the darkness through romantic love. In John chapter 4, we come across the woman at the well. She had a trail of failed relationships, and it had made her quite hardened. But see, the belief that romantic love is what's going to save us is alive and well in 21st century America. It's what all the different dating apps are selling. It's why millions love the song, Baby, It's Cold Outside. So there's all these different ways that we get the sense, the idea that we're pushing against the darkness. But listen, the biblical answer to overcoming darkness is the light that darkness cannot overcome. The arrival of Jesus is the arrival of life. True life, church, people. There's a commercial for a financial services company. You might have seen it. Husband and wife are in bed and they are reading before going to sleep. And the husband looks at the wife and says, "Do you ever worry we'll live forever?" And without missing a beat, she says to him, "No, it literally has never crossed my mind." And then we're showing a flashback to 4 months before when the wife was drinking a smoothie and freaking out about living to 100. And she says to herself, "That's 35 years of being retired. I don't want to outlive our money, and I keep eating all these stupid chia seeds. I could totally live to 100. Why do I keep taking such great care of myself?" And she spits out her smoothie. Now, I know it's a funny commercial about a financial services firm, but I want us to think about how eternal life is being pictured and described. The husband asks, "Do you ever worry we'll live forever?" And the answer comes back in terms of what? Outliving our money. Not much has changed in 2,000 years. Jesus warns some people who are fighting over money. And he says to them, life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Life, true life, is what Jesus offers us. He says in chapter 5, "I tell you the truth, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life." Listen, if we have Jesus, we have life. If we don't have him, we don't have life. It's that simple. If we have Jesus, darkness cannot overpower us. If we don't have him, darkness wins. I told you at the beginning about that character from that show, Richie. He lived in a dark place. And we often say that very thing, "I'm in a dark place." And I wonder if you can sense the darkness within. Can you? Can you sense the darkness within? I do, within myself all the time. And I certainly sense it around me. But so often we only point to the darkness out there, to those evil people, neglecting the deepest darkness we have, which is internal. Can you sense it? Can you sense it in yourself? Or are you so in denial? The gospel gives us exposure to the light. And when we respond to that light, it unlocks for us a new way of being. Let me give you an example from my life, but I could do what I'm going to tell you in 100 different ways. My parents separated when I was very, very little. And then a few years later, they got divorced. It would not be an exaggeration to say that growing up, I did not know one marriage, not one married couple whose marriage made me think, wow, I want that. Not one. That's a very dark place to live because men-women relationships and the marriage relationship, whether you're married or not, are so crucial and instrumental to the development of a person and of a healthy society. As a teenager, I had a string of relationships with different girls that were always short-lived. I got over them really fast. There was nothing healthy or godly about any of this. And then when I was 18 years old, as you know, as I've shared, I became a Christian. I came into the light of Christ. And from that moment on, I began being surrounded by Christians, many of whom were a good 10 years older than me, some of whom were married. And it was the first time in my life that I began to observe what a husband and with a healthy and godly relationship look like? And I began to dream. It was not unlike what Richie experienced, going to that place of excellence and being drawn in by those people and being transformed. I remember clearly believing and praying, I want that. I want what they have. And so my exposure to the light, and it was the light of Christ in so many ways, but certainly also reflected through their marriages and through their interactions with each other, unlocked for me a new way of relating to women. And it gave me all these new desires. And it gave me the will and the desire to fight sexual lust, to want purity of heart and mind, something I had never known about, even known that it existed, and to go a couple of years without approaching any woman romantically, because I wanted God to train me in the ways of Jesus, and I was in no hurry. I had a specific prize in mind. But all of that came into my life because of the light of Christ. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. I am Richie. We are Richie. We live or lived in a dark place. But can't we praise our God? And I don't mean a golf clap praise. Can we praise our God? The light and life have come to us. Yes, yes. This is what we celebrate in Advent. The arrival of Jesus is the arrival of life, true life. How have you defined life? In financial terms, an abundance of possessions equals life. In romantic terms, a person who loves you equals life. In friendship terms, a group of people who likes you equals life. In wellness terms, a healthy life equals life. There's only one definition of true life. If we have Jesus, we have life. All other life is derivative. It will cease. It will let you down. Jesus offers true life because he offers us the life of God. The life that conquers darkness. He allowed himself to go to the cross and be engulfed by darkness so that we may live forever. I am the bread of life, Jesus says. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. So church, this Advent season, slow down to treasure him. The baby in the manger is the life of the world.